Las Vegas Raiders are 2-9 on the season, and it has been a brutal season for the Las Vegas Raiders. It's a lot to talk about here because you look at Aidan O'Connell and you look at Gardner Minshew, and you may laugh and say, hey, what did the Raiders think was going to happen when you have two backup quarterbacks on your roster? But it's more than just that. We have to go back to last season when Josh McDaniels was the head coach. Matter of fact, let's go back the season before that. They hired Josh McDaniels to be the head coach with the Las Vegas Raiders, and immediately I was called crazy because I was never the biggest fan of Josh McDaniels. He's one of the worst coaches in the NFL without Bill Belichick. We saw this with the Denver Broncos. We also saw this with the Rams. The man is just a terrible coach without Bill Belichick micromanaging him, even behind the scenes. He's just not the most likable guy. But he comes over to the Las Vegas Raiders. He wants to build this team in his image. And he's already starting problems with Derek Carr, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow. At the time, those were the big three players for the Las Vegas Raiders. For context here, the Las Vegas Raiders made the NFL playoffs with Rich Bisaccia when he became the interim head coach. The reason why he was an interim head coach is because Coach Gruden had a lot of emails that leaked. It did not paint him in the best light. They moved on from him. And it seems like he's going to have a tough time finding a job in the NFL as a head coach again. But Coach Gruden was building something with the Raiders. You had Josh Jacobs. You had Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Derek Carr. You also had Henry Ruggs. Now, the Henry Ruggs situation is one of the saddest situations that you will ever read about because of what happened to the victim, and prayers to her and her family. But despite all of that, they made the NFL playoffs. You think they would bring back Rich Bisaccia. No, they didn't. They hired Josh McDaniels. And this will be the downfall of Derek Carr and his career with the Raiders. We fast forward a couple seasons. Derek Carr is not fitting the system with the Raiders. You bring in Davante Adams. The only reason why Davante Adams wanted to come to the Raiders was not because it was in Los Angeles and not because they had Josh McDaniels as the head coach. It was because he wanted to play with his close friend, Derek Carr. That's part of the reason why he wanted to go to the New York Jets or to the New Orleans Saints. So they go out there and they cut Derek Carr, a man that has been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in Raiders history. Say what you want to say about Derek Carr. He's not a top 5 or top 10 quarterback in my opinion currently. But Derek Carr, with this roster and how it's constructed, I think that you can at least be above 500 right now with him at the quarterback position. And I always found Derek Carr's tenure with the Raiders very interesting. The man never had a top defense in the NFL with the Raiders. They were always in the bottom half of the league, but he took so much blame for the Raiders. And I remember when he got into the NFL playoffs early in his career, he was not able to play the playoff game against the Houston Texans because he was injured. But you saw how good Derek Carr can be, and the fan base, they love him. But they move off of Derek Carr, and guess who they would bring in? Jimmy freaking Garoppolo, one of my favorites, another guy that I love so much, the system player himself, Jimmy Garoppolo from the San Francisco 49ers. Yes, he's had a lot of successful seasons in the NFL, but Jimmy Garoppolo is a definition of a system player. Many people thought that Brock Purdy was a system player with the 49ers, and some still do. But you look at Jimmy Garoppolo. The only reason why he was regarded as a top quarterback in the NFC at the time was because he played with a loaded football team, and he had a very good head coach in Kyle Shanahan. He comes over to the Las Vegas Raiders. The reason why he came over to the Las Vegas Raiders, he's the former backup for the New England Patriots behind Tom Brady for many years. And Josh McDaniels was the offensive coordinator with the Patriots, basically helped groom this kid. And they thought about him being the future of the Patriots when Tom Brady would retire. Well, we saw Tom Brady wanted to play forever, so they went out there and they moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo would come in with the Las Vegas Raiders. He would lead the league in interceptions before he got benched in favor of Aidan O'Connell. For context, he was dealing with a hurt shoulder, but at the same time, he was terrible. And part of the other reason to why he got benched, Antonio Pierce became the interim head coach. They fired Josh McDaniels after they got blown out by the Detroit Lions Monday Night Football game. And it all leads us up to this point. That's why I had to go back there and talk about everything that happened in the past. It brings us to this point. You have Aidan O'Connell, who you drafted in last year's draft class. And Aidan O'Connell had some good moments. He had some bad moments. He did not look like a franchise quarterback. And if you are an Aidan O'Connell fan, I have no problem with that. But I want you guys to know, majority of his numbers came against the Los Angeles Chargers with no Justin Herbert and when the team gave up on Brandon Staley. But you still had some good moments from Aidan O'Connell, who was able to push the football down the field. He showed very good accuracy and poise inside the pocket. They went out there and they signed Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew last season was not a terrible quarterback. I promise you, he does not look like how he looked now. like how he did last season. Last season, the Indianapolis Colts were one game away from making the NFL playoffs against the Houston Texans. The running back dropped the football at the backfield, and that basically was it. And Gardner Minshew played solid on the year with the Indianapolis Colts. He will never be a franchise quarterback in the NFL. That's why he's bounced around so much from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Philadelphia Eagles to the Indianapolis Colts. But you look at a guy like Gardner Minshew, he's a bridge starter. He can go out there and win you 2 to 3 games possibly. Hell, the Raiders went out there and they had a very good game against the Baltimore Ravens. They defeated the Ravens, with Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position. So when you look at Gardner Minshew on the year, you would think, hey, you bring him in, you have Devontae Adams, you have Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, let's go to work. Unfortunately, the team was not good enough. The offensive line is still a major problem, and they cannot run the football. They're dead last in rushing offense. And that's sad to see because Zamir White last season was a very good running back on the back half of last season. Josh Jacobs was not the same guy. Now we know why, because of terrible play calling and because of the situation that he was put into. He now looks like a top running back with the Green Bay Packers. Zamir White this season, even when the offensive line has given him room in front, he's just not a good running back. When you look at Zamir White, he's a backup running back at best. He could come in short yardage situations. He can get you 2 to 3 yards. He's a power back. This is a man last season. I know what he did against the Kansas City Chiefs. He ran tough. He ran hard. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day with Aidan O'Connell doing little to nothing in the second half. And that was in the back of Zamir White. As a backup running back, he could be solid. As an every down running back, he's not going to be that guy. I'm sorry to tell you. He was so bad this season that they put Alexander Mattison in front of him. And Alexander Mattison, he's only averaging 3.3 yards a carry. A lot of it is because the offensive line is bad, but these running backs, they're not game changers. Not even close. When I look at the wide receiving core, you trade Devontae Adams to the New York Jets. That was a blessing in disguise. For him to go out there and act the way that he did, he was tired of playing with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell. Look, I don't blame him. But the Raiders got a mid-round pick for Devontae Adams, and he does not look like the same wide receiver he once was with the Green Bay Packers or even early on with the Las Vegas Raiders. He looks completely different. You trade him to another terrible situation with the New York Jets, and you get a free pick out of it, because you still are a rebuilding team. When I look at the Raiders, you have to fix this offensive line in the offseason. You have to find your franchise quarterback through the NFL draft to bring in a veteran quarterback. I know a lot of Raider fans don't want to hear that, but you bring in a veteran quarterback that can give you enough time, and then you can roll in the rookie quarterback at some point in time next season. I think that's the plan to work with, because historically it's been proven. If you give a quarterback just 4 to 5 weeks to sit down, let alone a year, they'll be better off because of it. But when I look at this situation with the Raiders, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm saying a lot of negative things here. You're gonna have over $100 million in cap space this offseason. You just paid Christian Wilkins a lot of money. Maxx Crosby's getting paid a lot, but you're not paying a quarterback, not even close. You're still years away from that. You bring in a rookie quarterback, he's going to be on that rookie quarterback deal. And you just moved off Devontae Adams and that entire situation with that contract. So you'll be better off for that in the long term. You can bring in a top running back in the NFL free agency class, and you can bring in some better offensive linemen, because they're going to need that offensive line to work out. Colton Miller, his job is safe. He's a very good left tackle. Everyone else, job is in question, especially Cody Whitehair. He's terrible. He's one of the worst guards in the NFL. I don't care if you put him at left guard or right guard. He's horrible. But you do have Jackson Powers-Johnson. I like him a lot. I think that Jackson Powers-Johnson is going to be a very good interior offensive lineman. He can play left guard. He can play center. He can play right guard. That's what made him so attractive coming out of college to a lot of scouts, because of the versatility across the offensive line. You stick with him. You let him go through these rough spots that he's going through right now. Let him figure out the NFL and the speed of the game. I think that he can be a mainstay on this offensive line next to Colton Miller. You need to bring in a brand new right tackle, and that has been a problem for many years with the Raiders. And you need to bring in some more running back talent. When I look at the quarterback class this year coming out of college, it's not even close to being the best. Matter of fact, it's one of the worst. As long as the Raiders don't draft a guy like Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck, they'll be okay. Shedeur Sanders seems like the most likely option that they're going to go with because of Tom Brady and his partial ownership with the Raiders and his connection with Shedeur Sanders. He's helped train him before in the past. We know what Deion Sanders has said. He's not going to let his kid go to a terrible situation. When you look at the Raiders, even though I said all those things about Josh Daniels in the past, it seems like the Raiders have turned a corner. Now, the ownership, they're not one of the best in the NFL, but they're not one of the worst. You have good weapons in for a young quarterback, whether that's Shedeur Sanders or a guy like Cam Ward. You build this offensive line, you bring in a brand new running back. Hell, you may even want to draft a running back in this year's draft class. But get you some offensive line help. You have the wide receivers. I think Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker, they're more than enough. Jacoby Myers is the one positive that came out of the Josh McDaniels administration. He's a very good wide receiver. And we saw that with the New England Patriots. The man went out there and had a very good season with terrible quarterback play. And hell, he even did that and won the season to where they had the defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, calling offensive plays. He's a very good wide receiver, one of the most underrated players in the NFL. You also look at Brock Bowers, and this is where I get into one of the main positives with the Raiders. Besides Maxx Crosby and Christian Wilkins, this kid's a superstar. Right now, you can make the case that he's the best tight end in the NFL. He has played with Gardner Minshew, Aidan O'Connell. He's dealt with Luke Getsy as an offensive coordinator for a majority of the season. Then they fired him after that Bengals game. And I have a lot to say about that in the next couple of minutes. He's dealt with a terrible situation offensively. And he has went out there and he's put in nothing but work. He's on pace to have the best rookie tight end season of all time. 74 receptions. That's the second most in the NFL. Not to tight ends, to anyone in the NFL, including wide receivers, for 744 receiving yards. That's tied for the ninth most receiving yards in this league. 3 receiving touchdowns, and he's averaging a first down a catch, 10 yards a catch. This is a definition of a generational talent at that spot. And you can say, hey, they're force feeding him. That may be true, but he was doing this when Davante Adams was on the field. And it wasn't like they were putting Davante Adams in double coverage every single time. And when Davante Adams went out there, and he had a couple of good games with the Raiders this year before he suffered a hamstring injury and he wanted to be traded to the New York Jets, Brock Bowers was still putting in work with the Raiders. The fact that he's doing this with terrible quarterback play, a terrible offensive play caller, it's just phenomenal. This kid is going to be a mainstay. I really hope the Raiders can find their franchise quarterback and they can fix this offensive line and find a very good offensive coordinator. Because if they can, this kid can be in the same conversation with Travis Kelce and George Kittle in the future. Hell, he's in that conversation right now. But I'm talking about long-term and longevity in the NFL. If he can stay healthy and he can continue to play like this, we're talking about a superstar with the Las Vegas Raiders for many years to come. And this is one of the most exciting things that you look at on film with the Raiders. I'm proud of Brock Bowers. It was a lot of questions about him coming out of the NFL draft. He's undersized, how he looked. We know the last tight end that was hyped up like this was Kyle Pitts. He really hasn't worked out with the Atlanta Falcons due to injuries and terrible play calling. But hell, you look at Brock Bowers, he's on a different level. This kid's phenomenal. Doesn't give up on routes, runs with the quarterback. Even when the play runs down, he's running up the field. He is just always open. And he's a contested catch monster. You say that he's an undersized tight end. I can't tell on the field. This is a very good pickup for the Las Vegas Raiders. And we do get into the conversation. Well, I get into the conversation with other people and say, hey, what would have happened if Michael Penix Jr. was there in the first round? I think they would have selected Michael Penix Jr. for sure over Brock Bowers. But hey, hindsight's 20/20. You can't go back and change what happened in the past. You now have a star tight end. You just have to find your star quarterback in the future. When I look at the defense for the Raiders, I like their defense a lot. I like Robert Spillane. I like Divine Diablo. I like Maxx Crosby. He's still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. It sucks that Christian Wilkins was not able to stay healthy this entire season, and I hope this is not a trend with Christian Wilkins. He was a phenomenal defensive lineman with the Miami Dolphins, can play off the edge, can play in the interior of the defensive line. He had 9 sacks last year. This was the first time ever that Mad Maxx Crosby would have help to go out there and push the pocket to get after the quarterback position. And when you look at Maxx Crosby, he's always dealt with being chip blocked, triple teamed, and double teamed. And he still found a way to get to the quarterback. When I look at Maxx Crosby, he is still phenomenal. He's the face of the Las Vegas Raiders. He is the Las Vegas Raiders. You have to continue to build this defense around him because you still have defensive problems. A lot of it is because your offense is so bad and you're always on the field. When I look at Maxx Crosby and Christian Wilkins, those guys can get to the pass rusher at a high clip. It also sucks because before this season started, Malcolm Kuntz, who had 8 sacks last year, very good pass rusher, he hurt his knee. He missed his entire season. He was a very good pass rusher. So you look at Maxx Crosby numbers this year, you may say, hey, he's not up there with Myles Garrett and Trey Hendrickson. He's not a top pass rusher anymore. Yes, he is. He's just getting double teamed a lot because no one else can go out there and get to the quarterback. Tyree Wilson, I said this when they selected him in the first round from Texas Tech. I hated the draft pick. I think that he is a solid run stopper at best. He's still a freakish player. But when the Raiders are in the situation that they're in, you don't just draft guys off potential. You draft best player available. They drafted Tyree Wilson off potential. He's yet to hit that potential just yet. And right now, he looks like a bust. This is a man that cannot beat single coverage, and he is not as fast coming off the edge as the Raiders thought he was going to be. At Texas Tech, he could bend the edge, he could get to the quarterback, he could stop the run. This is different. When you're going against elite level offensive tackles and they're constantly coming at you and they're swinging guards at you, he looks confused. And I do understand this from this standpoint. He was not supposed to be in this situation in year number 1. Last season with Chandler Jones, because they wanted him to go out there and start majority of the time. But Chandler Jones had a lot of things going on off the field with his mental, and I hope that he's okay right now. They had to move off of Chandler Jones, and they bring in Tyree Wilson to be the starter for majority of the season. Just hasn't looked good. And we fast forward to year number 2 right now. He still doesn't look good, and he's dealt with injuries this year on top of that. You look at the secondary, Trayvon Mooring. I think he's a very good safety. He's one of the most underrated players in the NFL. And you have Nate Hobbs holding things down in the nickel position. They have good players. Unfortunately for them, they don't have the quarterback, the offensive line, or the play caller. When you fire your offensive play caller right after the game against the Cincinnati Bengals, you know what type of season it was going to be. I hope that the Raiders can figure things out, because you have a guy in Coach AP, Antonio Pierce, who is a culture setter. We saw this as soon as Josh McDaniels got fired. They were smoking cigars in the locker room. They look happy, and they love him as a head coach. Maxx Crosby loved him so much to where he threatened to go out there and request a trade if they did not bring him back. I think Coach AP is the right coach with the Raiders. Give him time. And I don't expect for the Raiders to go out there and be a playoff contender next season either. This is going to take some time. This is going to be a true rebuild from the ground up. I know Maxx Crosby said that he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. He's going to stay a Raider. More than likely for the rest of his career, he's going to be a Raider. You have to deal with this. And I still think that Maxx Crosby will be in a prime in his career when the Raiders are ready to make a playoff push. And part of the reason why I also say the Raiders are not going to be a playoff contender next season, anything can change from now. Look at how hard this division is. You have Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, in the Kansas City Chiefs. They're on a dynasty run. You have the Los Angeles Chargers with Coach Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, another franchise quarterback. Look at Bo Nix with Sean Payton. That's 3 teams. And all 3 of those teams are in the playoff conversation right now. That is how tough this division is. So it's going to take some time with the Raiders. But hey, if you continue to build this team through Coach AP's vision, you may be on to something. But let me know in the comment section below how you guys feel about the Las Vegas Raiders moving forward, and who do you want to see them draft in the first round, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless.